Hey guys, Eric here, and I want to talk to you real quick about thedailydownforce.com. Every day, this website covers the latest news and trends in NASCAR, from silly season right through the checkered flag in Phoenix. Need a new morning routine as soon as you wake up? Well, now you have it, dailydownforce.com. This is the website I use to keep up with the industry, the drivers, and of course, what the community is talking about. And speaking of community, dailydownforce.com is also home to some of your other favorite NASCAR content creators. Plus, they've got all sorts of information that I like to keep bookmarked, like schedules, penalties, ratings, and everything you want to know. Oh, and be sure to check out the merch shop while you're there to find some exclusive diecasts and collectibles. So check out dailydownforce.com, that's dailydownforce.com, and I'll see you in the replies. Eric Estep here. One of my favorite parts of being a NASCAR fan is collecting diecasts. It's how I got my start on YouTube, actually. To me, a room is not complete until it features shelves of NASCAR diecast cars. It's as good a time as ever to continue your collection or begin an all-new one by pre-ordering your favorite driver's 2022 next-gen diecast at lionelracing.com or at any authorized Lionel retailer. Lionel is the official diecast of NASCAR, and don't miss Lionel Racing's NASCAR Authentics diecasts at a Walmart or Target near you. Not only is Lionel the official diecast of NASCAR, but they're also official supporters of the Out of the Groove podcast network. So what are you waiting for? Head to lionelracing.com to order your favorite driver's 2022 diecast.
Hey, it's your host, Rick Houston, and I'm sure that you guys are going to like this week's episode because I sat down and talked to Robert Pressley. And anytime I can get a chance to talk to Robert Pressley, I'm going to take it, because the fact of the matter is he is just good people. And when it comes to this podcast, Moonshine and Motorsports, it's a natural, because Robert's family grew up in the Asheville area, and they might or might not have dabbled in the moonshine trade. And then they got into motorsports. His dad was a legendary short track racer in the Asheville area. That's where Robert got his start. And yeah, so this was just a natural connection between moonshine, motorsports, and the Pressley family.
Well, Robert, I don't know where to begin other than to ask, what is your earliest memory of your dad being involved in racing?
Oh, God, it had to be... He started racing in 1960. I was born in 59. So I actually can remember him racing probably at the age of 6 or 7, and probably heard enough stories that I might not have really remembered them, but I've just never forgot the stories. But by the time I was 10 years old is when I really realized what my dad done.
What was it at 10 years old that made you realize that?
You know, you get up a little bit in age, and racing was becoming somewhat of a sport that people started following, you know, leaving the days of drag racing or moonshine, let's don't say drag racing, just what racing was brought up on. And here we are in Western North Carolina, you know, one of the big capitals of where the moonshine started.
Now, tell me, you mentioned earlier while I was getting set up that your family had been involved in moonshining. Tell me about the Dukes of Hazzard here in Asheville.
Well, I mean, it's like I say, grandfather and them, you know, made it, and that was their way of living. But what people don't understand right here, over a mile and a half up the road was a place, a little old gas station, and a man built moonshine cars, took and put Cadillac motors in them. He went and beefed up the rear springs and was one of the best flathead Ford people there ever was. And, you know, what was odd about that, too, is Banjo Matthews, you know, was one of the local guys here that kind of learned from this man here how you take a moonshine car and make a race car out of it. And it was up there, and one of the funniest stories about it all is Jack Ingram just lived about 3 miles away, and Jack used to get on his bicycle, he said, when he was 10 or 11 years old, and ride down Bavard Road and pull in, and wanted to hang around that garage because Jack was getting interested in it, and said that the man said, "Hey, I got a job for you. I need you to wash these cars down here in the back." And Jack would wash them and Jack said after a while, he asked the man, said, how come I wash these cars every day and then I come in next day and they're dirty? And the old guy said, best thing to do is wash the cars and keep your mouth shut, okay?
Now, this area is such a hotbed for racing. You had so many people that raced up around here. Did those roots go back to moonshining, or was there something else at play that made this such a big place for stock car racing?
You know, we have to say the roots was for moonshining. And, you know, by the time Asheville Speedway was built in the 60s, you know, we had a couple dirt tracks. Asheville Weaverville was in the rising to be built, and it was originally built by some of the guys that made their fortune in that probably and wanted to start racing as the Francis got it going. But really, I don't think that we ever contributed, or the Homestead people here ever contributed back to moonshining. But like I say, Asheville Speedway attracted so many great race car drivers. And, you know, the best saying about Asheville Speedway that you'll hear in any of the archives you read, if you could win at Asheville Speedway, you could win anywhere in the United States.
As a child, what's the most heated confrontation you remember your dad getting into, and what was your reaction to that?
Scared to death. And that's probably about the time I was 10 years old. So this had to happen around 1968, 69. And my daddy and a man named Bosco Lowe got into altercation. Then it turned into a demolition derby. They destroyed their cars down at the racetrack right in front of everybody on the main straightaway, and then got out and started fighting. And, you know, seeing that, you know, I'd seen some heated discussions and things and heard it around the house, but had never witnessed really just, you know, boxing match right there. And that's whenever I realized, you know, this is something I'm going to have to live with the rest of my life. And what I mean live with is from time 8, 9, 10 years old all the way up to 21 years old of Daddy racing, seen so many confrontations that he had that's why I really started racing at a late age, because I really didn't want to live and go through what he went through.
Really?
I mean, we had times, and you're here in Bent Creek where I growed up and everything, and my dad lived here, you know, since the 30s. You know, we would get home on a Friday night after a race, and, you know, you have to know this area. We're right in between the Biltmore State land, the National Forest, the Parkway. So we're at the end of a road here. And Friday nights, if there was confrontation at the racetrack, Daddy with somebody, or, you know, Bob Pressley is like the king of Asheville Speedway. Yeah. And people coming by, you know, and cussing, calling out all kind of names. And, you know, here we all are and just wondering. And it was like Daddy never was worried about it, you know. He'd sit there and say, you know, hey, if they were serious, they would stop. They wouldn't be running.
Now, what was your mama's reaction to all that?
My mama stood by my daddy's side the whole time. I mean, I don't remember it, but supposedly the night Daddy and Bosco got into it and Demolition Derby, the fight, that them two was fighting also. So this was a free-for-all that night right there. Now, and that's probably
them two.
My dad's wife, my mom, and Bosco's wife. So it was, I mean, this was one big confrontation that went on at Asheville Speedway. One of many, you know, that happened down there.
So you've kind of touched on it. At what point did you start thinking about driving yourself? Did you actually wait because of all the controversy and stuff that was going on?
No, I tell you what. So whenever you grow up like we did, and there was 5 of us kids, and having to go to Columbia, South Carolina on Thursday night to race. Asheville Speedway on Friday or Augusta, Georgia on Friday, depending on if Daddy was suspended from NASCAR or not. And then Macon, Savannah on a Saturday or Hickory. And then Sunday, Dad'd pick us up, at the church up here at 12 o'clock, and we'd go to Harris. So here it was, 4 days a week. We was going to racing from March up to October. And as I got older and got to be 16, 17, and Dad started traveling up and down the East Coast racing, I become a teenager that had never got to see a high school football game, had never been to a junior, senior, hadn't been. If it wasn't racing, we didn't know it here. We was secluded here, helping Dad or staying out of the way of Dad, and him make sure we got an education and went through school and everything. So around 20 years old, Dad did not want none of us boys racing. Charlie was his crew chief from 13 years old. Mike was my next oldest brother. So I was kind of always in the middle of the five. So I was with Mama a lot of the times and never in the garage because Daddy said, this is not something I want any of y'all to do. This is a hard way to make a living, and you need to get out, get an education, and do something and make money. And it was up to I was about 22 years old that my future brother-in-law was looking for a race car, and I found one, and I said, hey, I'll go get it. I'll go get it for you, and I'll help you out, because I'm getting a little more mature now that I went through my wild stages or whatever. Yeah. Being a teenager. So I went and bought the car, didn't have a motor in it or nothing, down in Dallas, North Carolina. A lot of people don't know where that is. Yeah. And I took off to Greenville.
Now, isn't that near Gastonia?
Gastonia,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the guy's name was Larry. He's the only thing I can remember about his red car. And I said, I'm going to go down to Greenville and watch the race. And it was me and another guy. And we pulled in, and it was my first encounter with the Blackwells. And everybody knows how Greenville Pickens and what the Blackwells was like down there. And said, you going to race that car? I said, no. He said, well, why you got it in my pit area? I said, well, I just went and bought it, ain't got a motor in it. He said, well, we're going to push it out there. We need another car. My first race. They put a record behind it, and it wouldn't start. And I loaded up, and I come home that night, and I said, you know what, I'm going to race. I think I'm going to race. So talked to Dad, and he said, you ain't racing here. If you're going to do it, you're doing it on your own. Because he wanted us to see how hard it was and not to give us anything. And so over the winter, I built that car, or rebuilt it, and brother-in-law helped me. Best story is my very first race with a motor in the car was at Hickory Speedway. And I go down there, practice, qualify, and back then you run heat races, so odd numbers in one, even in the other. And they're going through the rundown. And now my dad's in the race, okay? He's racing too. So they call him out. He's either on the pole in the first heat or second heat, Harry Gant, Morgan Shepherd, all them, And they go to second heat, and they start calling out the names. And you would not think me and Daddy was father and son, because he was just standing there like I was another race car driver. That's how serious he was. And then they said, and number 59. And I remember saying, Dad, is this the way they do that? And he said, what? I said, they make your first race, you have to start in the rear? He says, no, son, that's where you qualified at. He said, you don't even need to be out here. And I can remember that heat race getting lapped in a 7-lap heat race. And that's when reality set in. I said, you know what? That was Daddy's way of telling me I didn't need to race, that this ain't easy. So I got Charlie, my brother, to start helping me. And I got serious. I put everything aside except racing, like I'd growed up and said I would never do again. And we got together, went out, started winning races and everything, and then, the rest is history.
Your dad was obviously a legend in these parts, and he obviously had his share of confrontations, as you've talked about. How much pressure did you feel to live up to what he had accomplished? And also, did you pick up some of the leftover ill feelings that he might have had with other people and them taking their issues with him out on you?
No, I never did think that I needed to be like my dad. Yes, there was a lot of similarities in us, the way we raced and everything. But he was the best mentor that I could have had, because we was at Asheville Speedway and it's your dad. And he makes a living, and I had a job at Coca-Cola, so it was kind of a hobby, but I wanted to make a profession out of this. And I remember running second to him twice down at Asheville and could have beat him, but if you raced Bob Pressley, you knew you better be prepared whenever you passed him what the consequences was going to be. Because, he was what everybody always called him, the Dale Earnhardt, before Dale Earnhardt Sr. was Dale Earnhardt Sr. He was one of the toughest competitors they ever was. And he come back to me after that second race, got out of the car, come back there, and he said, boy, you ain't, he didn't call me Robert. He said, boy, you ain't never going to make it in this sport. When you're on that racetrack, you don't have no friends. And I said, Daddy, I'd had to spin you out. Son, you do not have no family or friends on these racetracks. You give what you can get, and you don't take nothing. 2 weeks later, I'm running second, and I can't get by him. And something
Who are you running second behind?
My dad.
Oh, here we go.
And I turned him and won the race. Go back 2.5 weeks earlier when he told me there was no family, there was no friends.
Yeah.
He grabbed me and he said, let me tell you something. You ever touch my race car again? I don't care if you're a mama or what. You don't do that. Dad, you told me, he said, son, you don't ever touch that race car again. That started the feud. It used to be Bob and Bosco Lowe. Then it was Bob Pressley, Jack Ingram, Bob Pressley, Ned Setzer, Bob Pressley, and somebody all the time, because that was my daddy's mentality. He was rattling cages before people rattled the cage,
Yeah.
And we stayed into it the whole year.
You and your dad.
Me and my dad, and I won the majority of the races because I had good help. I had people that was coming on. I had a couple sponsors that helped. But that was the hardest thing. And finally, it got to where my dad was getting older, and it was other people I was racing with. And I kept the same mentality racing everybody. I'll race you the way you race me.
Yeah.
And there was times that I might have got them first before they got me, but it was a deal I had to win. That was just drilled into me. If you're going to do this, you better go to win. Don't go there to make friends or anything. And that's one thing Dad really taught me. He wasn't mad at me because I spun him out. He was mad because he lost some money. He was proud of what I'd done to not take nothing off anybody.
How did you first meet Brad Daugherty?
We're at the racetrack in 1986, I guess. Have to check these dates. And he is graduating from UNC Tar Heels. And, we're at the racetrack, and
Now, he's from
Black Mountain, about 20 minutes away.
Oh, okay.
So he comes down in the pits after a race, and I'd won, and I was not a fan favorite, okay? You loved Bob Pressley, or you loved Randy Porter. You loved Bob Pressley, or you loved, Jimmy Doyle. You loved Bob Pressley, or you loved Jack Ingram. I had no fans except my wife, because
Yeah.
a lot of Bob's fans didn't like me because of the controversy we had and said I was disrespectful and had no. So I was kind of always the lone sheep. So after the race, Brad and 4 or 5 of his buddies around here come down there, and, you know, there ain't nobody around my car, and I'd won the race. And he walked up, and my brother-in-law now, huge basketball fan. Like I say, I knew nothing about any other sports.
Yeah.
It was racing's all we knew. And he walks up, and they start talking. They said, "Hey, this is Brad Daugherty." I said, "Well, hey, how you doing?" And it was small talk.
Yeah.
It was, who is this guy? You know, I don't know who Brad Daugherty is. I don't keep up with basketball. So whenever he walked off, they said, "Hey, that's Brad Daugherty, North Carolina Tar Heel, #1 draft choice this year, going to Cleveland Cavaliers." I said, "Wow." So he come walking back by. I said, "Hey, Brad," like I've known him my whole life, you know. Yeah. I said, "Man, I didn't know who you was." I said, "Heck, I'm not much into basketball or anything, but God, why is somebody like you at this racetrack?" He said, "Oh, I love racing," and we got talking. Just me and him, and, you know, his buddies was looking at the race car. He said, "God, I'd like to get into this." Now, I've met him for 15 minutes, and I said, "Hey, I'm racing Greenville tomorrow night." I said, "Anytime you ever want to go to the racetrack, holler at me, okay?" He said, "Hey, I'd like to. What time y'all leave?" And I said, "We'll leave around 12 o'clock or something. We usually get out in the garage there about 10, load up and everything." He said, "Hey, I might go to Greenville with you." So they leave. We come on home. Tell my wife, I said, "Boy, wouldn't it be something if I had somebody like that to go to the racetrack with, you know?" I said, "That could be sponsors right there." That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And next morning, I never thought I'd see Brad Daugherty again except on TV.
Yeah.
Next morning, about 10:30, he pulls in the driveway at the garage. It's right beside my house. He's in a yellow Corvette convertible, and there's his head sticking out over. And he's by himself, and I said, "Hey." He said, "Am I too early to go to the race?" And he rode the racetrack with me, and that was his life until he went to Cleveland, you know, in October for training. And as soon as basketball was over in March, April with pro ball, he was right back Asheville, go to every racetrack we went to. We become buddies, and that leads up there to about 1988. We're coming back from Greenville Pickens, and we'd won like different numbers is, you look at it, and we didn't race every week, but we won like 31 in a row there. And we got ambushed coming home one night, me and Brad and another guy.
Where at?
Coming up Saluda Mountain out of Greenville, South Carolina home. And I got home and I said, you know.
Now, you got ambushed. What?
A guy threw the tire through the window of our truck coming up the mountain and pointed the gun out through there and shot up, you know, above the cab of the truck. It was more or less a warning. You come back to Greenville, you know, you're going to face some consequences. Well, next week was funny. We had enough ammunition in that truck. We went for war.
Not.
And went down there, and it was the last time I ever went to Greenville. No trouble down there. We won the race coming home. And I told Brad and my wife, we got back, his girlfriend's here, and I said, you know what? I'm reminiscing of 20 years ago, basically, of what I went through with Daddy, watching that you can't do anything. I'm fixing to have my first son, Coleman. And I said, I'm not going to do this. And we sat down there in the house that night, 2 o'clock in the morning. Brad said, Robert, you can't quit, but you're too good to be right here. I just won the Mid-Atlantic region for the second time, won the Greenville championship, had won the Asheville championship for the 4th or 5th straight year in a row. And, you know, we'd won at Concord, Anderson, and everything, just going different places. He said, let's build a Bush car. I said, oh, in this garage?
Yeah.
He said, I'll help you. I'll get us some money. So I sold my late model stuff, built a Busch car, and 1989 went out, run some of the tracks there, Hickory, South Boston, Lanier, Georgia, Indianapolis, and we run great. But something always fell off the race car. We was not prepared to run 200 lap races. You know, there's a difference of your regular 50 lap races every week. Jack Ingram come by my garage, and him and Daddy's rival, and Jack had helped me through the year only to beat Daddy. He agitated me because this was Jack's way to get at Daddy. He said, Robert, let me tell you what, you're a good race car driver, but you got to finish these races. Now, let me tell you what you do, and if you know Jack Ingram, when he gets in your face and starts telling you what to do.
Yeah, you listen. Yeah.
He said, where are you going to go? And I said, well, I think I'm going to go to Charlotte and try to make the race. He said, you don't need to be at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Let me tell you what you need to do. You need to get this race car in here. You need to get these boys to work on this car and get ready. We got Hickory, South Boston, Orange County coming up. If you'll go down there and finish a race and look good, he said, you'll have an opportunity. Don't just go to every race to say you're there. We missed a couple races, went through that car all the way. Jack come by, done a little bit, went to Orange County, August of 1989, and won the race.
Yeah, he did.
What was special about the race was winning at Chapel Hill with Brad Daugherty, Joe Wolf, played at Carolina, and all them. And Monday morning, get back home, I think it paid $8,800, which was good money in '89. And got 3 phone calls from different owners. C.C. Wellifer, the 34 car, because Spencer was going to move around. And then Alliance had called me where I ended up at, and then this other guy wanting to start a team. And I thought, if I'd known it was that easy, all you had to do is win. And they would be calling you and not looking for sponsor money anymore.
Yeah.
So through the week, I said, hey, Brad, listen. Man, I know me and you started this race team, but I've got opportunity to go drive for other people. But you the one that brought me here, and I want to make sure, he said, listen here, Robert, I ain't spending my money all my life on these race cars.
Yeah.
You get an opportunity.
Yeah.
So we went and run 2 more races that year with my car with the Alliance name, and then we rebuilt Alliance because they was an ARCA team, and I talked them into running Busch Grand National.
There's not a whole lot to add to that conversation because, again, Robert is an extraordinary storyteller. He grew up in the Asheville area. His family was in Moonshine. He grew up to be a racer himself and did very well for himself. So, yeah, it was a natural connection for this podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will be back soon with yet another Moonshine and Motorsports story.